Good morning everyone, welcome to the EduSite Network. Today's lecture is part of an ongoing series on the foundations of Indian art and architecture. Yesterday we had our introductory lecture in which we talked about Indian art, and in today's lecture we will talk about Indian architecture in more detail. And our subject expert here is Dr. Seema Bawa, Professor of History, University of Delhi. She was here with us yesterday, and she is here with us today also to talk more in depth about Indian architecture while giving us an introductory lecture. She has published extensively, especially on gender and sexuality in early Indian art, and we welcome you, ma'am. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. What we discussed yesterday was that there are some norms that are important for the creation, production as well as consumption of Indian art, and we did this in context of sculpture. Today I am going to just continue with that and try and discuss how this gets translated into architecture. Architecture is basically what we create in space, how space is divided, and then particular structures are created into this, these could, of course, architecture is a positive as well as a negative concept, in the sense that in Kailashanath temple in Ellora, it is negatively cut from rock, from top to the base it is cut. So, it is technically a sculpture, but we still call it architecture because it is a temple, right? But there are structural temples also that are built from the base to the top, all right, like the Bhojpur temple, the Gangai Chola, but the Brihadeshwara temple, the Khajuraho group of temples, all these are structural temples. But what I really want to here emphasize is that Indian and Indic architecture has certain principles that define it and that unify it in very important ways, and these have certain rules and regulations which we are going to study a little bit today. First, essentially, in the nature of Indian architecture, what we have is that Indian religion and religious art and architecture is essentially experiential, all right. That when you go to a temple or you go to a stupa or you go to a chaitya, what are you doing? You are experiencing this monument, you are experiencing this building, you are experiencing this particular art or architecture. This you can do through touching, which is sparsha, feeling, which is anubhuti or anubhav, and seeing. Seeing is darshan. Now, darshan is not just merely seeing, but seeing within quotes. You are seeing the divine, okay, and it's a double-sided thing. The divine is also seeing you, all right. So, this is a exchange of the gaze. You gaze at the divine, but if you are looking at an icon in the Garbhagriha, the icon is also looking at you, okay. The image of the God is looking at you, and through that is transferring blessings to you. So, darshan is a very, very important element. Whenever you go to a temple, sometimes you say, "Aaj bahut achhe darshan hue," you had a very good darshan. That really means actually that you had a very good experience, a divine experience through this act of seeing, all right. So, Indian architecture is not mainly congregational. So, you don't all, in pilgrimages people go together, but individually experience the God or the divine or divinity, right. You don't all experience it together. As you stand in front of the icon or the linga, whether it is the linga or it is the Devi or whatever icon that it may be, the connection that the devotee has is a very individual connection. It is not a collective connection. That is why we say it's not congregational. It's not a congregational prayer, all right. When you have a darshan, your darshan may be very different from a person who's gone with you, all right. So, how you or an individual, the devotee experiences the divinity can be different at the same time and at the same place, all right. So, that is why it is not the same as the Sunday prayers or collective namaz or something like that. So, it is a very individual experience, and this individual experience is negotiated and controlled through architecture, which is the architecture of the temple, all right. Now, this experience as the darshan can be metaphysical, it can be spiritual, or it could be symbolic, all right. So, the symbols that you see in the icon as well as in the architecture are, and your understanding of it, are what makes this experience complete, all right. The architecture, which is the building, and the sculpture, which is the image, are part of the worship or puja. So, puja is not merely offering flowers or agarbatti, dhoop, lamp, incense, etc. But puja is also looking at, touching this building or going around this building or looking at and gazing upon the image. So, puja, this particular building and image are part of the process of the puja. This, both the building and the image also represent the universe in a microcosm, and that is why they are part of the puja. And this is what we are going to do through two examples of architecture that I have taken, the Buddhist stupa and the Hindu temple, which represent these particular elements of Indian architecture. First of all, let us take the stupa. Stupa, as many of you would know, but for those who don't, is a very, very ancient monumental type in India. Though we have Buddhist remains actually coming as evidence archaeologically from Bharhut and Sanchi in Madhya Pradesh as the earliest sites where we found monumental architecture. We have mention of the stupa in pre-Buddhist literature also. Stupas are basically graves of ascetic saints and are regarded as holy places of pilgrimage and places for meditation. These are known as thupas also. These are basically dome shaped, and the dome shape really begins with the Buddhist stupas. The dome shape basically originated in the form of the seated position of the saints in which they were buried. Okay, they also represent the proportions of the Buddha's body. The shape is said to be that of Buddha seated in meditation. Okay, when the tradition is that when Buddha achieved parinirvana, the funerary remains were divided into 8 parts, and these were distributed amongst 8 states and 8 different janpadas, and 8 stupas were built over it. All these 8 stupas were different in design. Okay, the 8 is symbolic of the 8 major events in Buddha's life, which is his birth, enlightenment, turning of Dharma's wheel, which is the first sermon at Sarnath, descent at Sankesh from the Tushita heaven, performing miracles like crossing the Nilanjana river, etc., reconciling a split in the Sangha at the bamboo grove, voluntarily prolonging his life at Vaishali and his Parinirvan at Kushinagar. Okay. The 8 also represents the 8-fold path of enlightenment, which includes right view, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right diligence, right mindfulness and right meditation. All right. In terms of architecture symbolism, the stupa corresponds to 5 elements, the Panchabhuta. Okay. The square base of foundation corresponds to earth. The dome is like a bubble. Okay. So that is why it corresponds to water, like bulbula. So that is why it is like water. The harmika is a stone fence and it corresponds to fire. The pole of the umbrella or the parasol corresponds to air or the wind, and the umbrella or the chhatra itself corresponds to ether or void or space. All right. Now, just to show you the various parts, you can see that you have the harmika, which is the pavilion. On the top you have the chhatra, then you have the pole, then harmika, the and or the dome, which is also called the womb chamber, like the egg. Then you have the square, okay, part underneath. All right. These are also where the railing is known as the Vedika. Right. There are other symbolisms associated with the stupa. Okay. Starting with the first step of the foundation, moving upwards, each part is symbolic of some aspect of Buddhism. The first step, which faces all 4 directions, stands for the foundations of mindfulness. Okay, mindfulness of body, sensation, mind and phenomena. The second step of the foundation corresponds to the 4 efforts, kriyas, that one can make. The effort to destroy evil that is present, evil that is not yet present but can come, to produce good that is not yet present, and to cultivate the good that is present at the moment and to encourage it. All right. The third step represents 4 psychic powers that the stream enterers or the enlightened ones are said to have: the desire to act, energy, thought and investigation. The top of the 4th step on the base of the stupa stands for 5 faculties: faith, energy, mindfulness, reason and concentration. All right. Yet another interpretation of the symbolism of the architecture of the stupa is that the and or the dome stands for the 7 factors of enlightenment: mindfulness, truth, energy, rapture, serenity, concentration and equanimity. The harmika on top of the dome represents the 8-fold path of enlightenment. This harmika holds a pole or the yashti, and which is the stem of life. The stem represents 10-fold knowledge, knowledge of law, people's thoughts, relations, empirical knowledge, knowledge of suffering, the cause of suffering, annihilation of suffering, knowledge of the way that leads to annihilation of suffering, knowledge of things connected with despair and knowledge of non-production of things. So, basically it is something that is related to dukkha and release from dukkha. Finally, the topmost part of the stupa or the tree of life corresponds to the 13 mystical powers of Buddha. Buddha, the stupa is worshipped as a living being. It is a body. Okay. Each of its parts represents the body of the Buddha. Okay. Each of its part, like for the bottom part is the legs in a sitting position. The dome represents the torso and shoulders, and the top represents the head. The cylindrical discs on the yashti or the pole resembles the umbrella that is held usually by an attendant over rulers and other Mahapurushas like the Buddha. Now please, this is something that's very important, because the stupa as a living body is something that is also echoed in temple architecture. Okay? The stupa, along with all these, it represents the Buddha and his dharma. It is a miniature representation of the world as a whole. It represents the cosmos. The central mount resembles a mountain. And in India, cosmology of the world is arranged with great mountain Sumeru at the center, all right, with the rivers flowing out from it all over the continent. The four directions and gates of the great stupa might also represent a traditional village in Vedic times, with main streets running in the northwest and east-west directions, okay, with a tree in the middle under which a lot of people sit. This is the Sanchi stupa. As you can see, you can have a harmika at top with the yashti, then you have an and you have two levels of railings. One is the sopana, which is the way to heaven, and then the middle railing, and then the base railing, okay, and four gateways in four cardinal directions, which basically also represent the way in which the dharma and the sangha and Buddha spread in all cardinal directions, all right. Again, at Amravati, we have a similar kind of arrangement here, where you have gates in all in the diagram at the bottom. You can see this, that you have gates around the circumambulatory with the railing, okay, on all four cardinal directions, but instead of toranals, what you have are four ayaka pillars, right. This is a kind of an imaginative drawing of what the stupa would have looked like. As you know, Amravati no longer is an extant stupa. It is basically now more or less in London Museum, all right. This is at the base level. This is from Sanghol in Punjab, but you can see at the center, okay, is where the relics of the Buddha or his main disciples were kept, and from here you have spokes radiating out like a chakra, okay, in 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, etc. in an ever increasing manner. These also represent the increasing power of and increasing influence, the increasing sovereignty of the Buddha, Sangha and Dharma, all right, in these in all directions, like a Chakravartin or a Vijigishu. A Vijigishu is a term that is used in Arthashastra. Chakravartin is a term that is very often used in Buddhist sources, right. Now I come to another example, which is the temple, all right. The temple is a very starts from, say, it starts in the about the early Christian era, but it really takes concrete form from the 5th century onwards, from where it becomes a very important element of architectural space in Indian religious milieu. The entire institutional as well as religious ritual milieu is centered around the temple. This is because there is a shift from the Vedic sacrifice to puja, often centered on the icon housed in the temple. All right. So, we saw yesterday that how an icon is conceived and how it originated in the bhakti concept of bhakti and in local cults. Similarly, when you have the imagination of an icon, you have a place where you have to put this icon. All right. This place is the temple. Right. So, there is a shift from a Vedic sacrifice, a yajna, okay, to a temple. From about the 6th century CE, structural temples of stone and brick and other permanent materials started being made, and this was coeval with the development of theistical religions, that is Vishnuism, Shivaism, Shaktism, Mahayana Buddhism. These are the religions that were developing, sectarian religions centering around a particular godhead and his pantheon were developing, right? And temples were being made in order to house these multifarious gods and their various forms. These temples were not only sources of investment for the kings, the new dynasties and their feudatories, but also were a visible reflection of artistic developments in society. Though there was a priesthood, the Brahmanas, who had control over religious matters, especially through temples, and were dependent on kings, but they were dependent on kings and nobles for financial support, because it's the kings and nobles who were the ones who were making these temples. Gods and temples, like humans and other living creatures, were also subject to a hierarchical setup. More important gods resided in very large temples that had their own setup, they had their own lands, they had their own servants, they had shops, they had subsidiary buildings, but no lesser and more localized village deities lived in small temples and shrines and did not have so many resources at their beck and call. All right. This is just to show you that that architecture, develops from Vedic sacrifice, like the so-called Ashwamedh altar at Nagarjuna Kund. That Vedic or sacrificial altars such as Yagyashalas were made, and these were frozen in architecture through temples. Hindu temples were built to shelter images that focus worship, but they also shelter the worshipper and they provide space for a controlled ritual. It is here that ritual of all kinds, puja, archana, is controlled. The Hindu Brahmanical temple is a sum total of architectural rites performed on the basis of its myth. Whatever myths are associated with the temple and its icon are encompassed within the temple. All right. These myths also are in the ground plan and the elevation on which the structure is raised. These elements, the ground plan and the elevation, emphasize the symbolic essence of the form of the temple. Architectural elements of form, symbolic aspects of the site where it's made. The plan itself writes of rituals associated with temple building, and modular plans of the temple are all linked to each other. They are not independent of each other, they are all linked to each other. And deities are invited to dwell in the body of the icon through ritual, and they take their departure also both in domestic and public religious spaces. Now, by this I mean that if the temple is a permanent abode of the gods, it's been made permanent, made with permanent materials, and a deity is enshrined inside, it is not understood by any of the believers that the god is permanently inside that particular icon. He is invited through special rites of invocation called avahan, that please come and dwell in the body of the icon while the devotee has darshana. He gazes upon and experiences the icon, and after that the god is asked to leave both in domestic as well as temple spaces, and he goes back to his heavenly abode and the ritual is complete, and again this ritual is repeated. All right. So, it's the structure may be permanent, but the experience is not permanent. All right. This again I am trying to show you that in domestic spaces also you have in impermanent material, you have the experience of deities through mandalas and yantras on which you do puja, as well as on which you concentrate and meditate upon. All right. So, you have various things like yantras or mandalas of the Devis, okay, the 64 64 yoginis, or you could have it on the Navagrahas or on the Ganeshas. All right. This is the Vedic sacrifice official or altars. The Sarvatra Bhadra Mandal is also one kind of way of organizing ritual space. All right. At the center you can see this is the first, the bottom is the first slide, first step, and then you have the second step, and the center you will see is where the actual ritual will take place. That is the center. This is the Brahma Sthal. Again we will be talking about Brahma Sthal in a little while. So, this is the Ganesha Mandal. Okay. There are two prototypes for the form of the temple, the house of the dwelling and the palace. Earliest temples were inspired by hermitage structures of the hut or the kuti or the cave, in which rishis and munis would live in their gurukuls or in their hermitages. Okay. Later the palace of the king became the inspiration, as the deity assumed royal elements and used monumental architecture. All right. So, the royal elements such as Vishnu. Vishnu is very royal. He has a kirita mukut. He is golden in color, richly ornamented. So, the deity assumes kingly or royal functions, right, or the vice versa. Vastu Shastras like Samrangan Sutradhar that we talked about recommends that dwellings of gods be made in places where gods are at play, Leela, जहाँ पर भगवान लीला करते हैं, such as the Sri Shore, lakes or river, or at the Prayag or mountain tops, etc. All right. Water physically and ritually is central to temple architecture. So, where there is no natural water bodies available, there are no rivers, there is no Godavari, or there is no Tapti or Narmada or Ganga or whatever, then tanks and reservoirs are to be made, because you need purification rituals not only for the devotee but also for the deity. So, you have Abhishek, So many times you have Rudra Abhishek and other Abhisheks being performed. Okay, these are all rituals connected with the temple, right? These are very important to the temple, right? Like the consecration of an image, the temple itself is a divine image, and it is besides being an abode of the divine image, it is by this I mean that, you know, it is where the divine image is housed, it is the abode, it is a devalya, all right. But the temple itself is a deva, all right. So it is a devalya and a deva. The darshan of the temple is as important as the darshan of the image inside, all right. On the ground, there is a divine ground plan in shape of a mandala, which is a geometric map of the cosmos. There is a sanctum or the garbhagriha where the image is installed. Then there are the 8 directions which define the cosmic regions, which are guarded by the Lokapalas. Then there are other deities such as Navagrahas or the celestial deities which occupy other quadrants, and as such the temple becomes an architectural pantheon. By pantheon you mean all the gods and Deva Mandal as it is called in Hindi, right. And before a temple is made, you have to have a lot of rituals of construction that make this temple divine. You know, the temple does not start off as being divine. Through the act of construction and consecration, both the image and the temple become divine, all right. First you choose a very good site, as I said, it should be near the water, etc., etc. Then the ground is prepared by leveling it, through ploughing it, and rites of purification. The ground is then symbolically sown with various varieties of grain to ensure fertility of the site, so that, you know, there is ongoing fertility. And then cow dung is layered on it, there is lepan, okay. Then a geometric design of Vastu Purush Mandala is drawn on it. This Vastu Purush Mandala, among very many other things, is an attempt to define or mark out sacred space from profane. So, once this mandala is drawn, this space, it becomes sacred. The space outside it remains profane, all right. There are also rites performed to make this divine dwelling by ridding it of inauspicious forces and making it ready for divinity. So, bhutas, pretas and other inauspicious beings are asked and beseeched to leave, so that this space then becomes ready, okay. So, this is how Vastu Puja is performed. You know, you dig and then you make a mandala and then you put various offerings into it. The Vastu Purush Mandala itself is a square diagram in which through which altars, temples, houses, palaces and cities were founded. So, altars is seen, all right. This is an altar, this is where a havan or a yajna can take place. So, this is an altar, right. Temples we will do, houses, any house also will have some kind of a mandala in a traditional practice made under it. So, would have a palace or a prasada. Cities, you know, cities are also actually, like Jaipur is a city that is founded on a Vastu Purush Mandala, where there you have a grid pattern. The mandala consists a grid of squares, 8 into 8, which is 64, or 9 into 9, 81, or 108, or some such symbolic and symmetrical number. The square imitates the square railings that were built around early yaksha and tree shrines, as can be seen in Buddhist architecture. All right. So, we just go back to what we have done in early Buddhist architecture. Though the mandala is square, in theory it is a circle, right. So, there is a large circle that joins all the cardinal points. The four sides are determined by the four cardinal directions. The completion of the sacred diagram involves its division into padas or sub-squares in which different deities reside. All right. At the center you can see is the Brahmasthal, where Brahma resides. In the four sides are the cardinal directions, and then you have the Lokapalas in the middle direction. So, you have 8 Lokapalas, you have 4 Dikapalas, you have in each square you would have a certain god or goddess, all right, Savitra, Rudra, Jaya, and other gods who dwell in each square, all right. And through rites of consecration, they are invited to come and live in the Vastu Purush Mandala in the over this the Garbhagriha is then erected. Okay. The central square, known as the Brahmasthal, represents the axis mundi. Now, the axis mundi means the universal axis. It is believed that this is where the center of the earth is. This is where the universe revolves around this. All right. So, the temple from and over the Brahmasthal, the image is erected. All right. This is also the line that passes through the center of the Shikara, which we will do shortly. The same is true of the Vedic altar, where I have just shown you that there is at the center is the Brahmasthal. The ground plan of the temple concretizes Vedic sacrifice, all right, constantly. The Brihad Samhita and other such texts that we did yesterday elaborate on the mandala and its concretization of the concepts and designs of the Mahavedi and Yajnishala. This is reinforced through rituals such as depositing the Nidhi Kalasha and laying the square Adharashila. Nidhi Kalashas, a Kalasha containing the treasures of earth, all right, and you deposit it in the center. Offerings are made to Brahma and all other deities, thus completing the first stage of rituals associated with the construction of the temple. These rites control and order space and are prescribed in Vastu and Shilp Shastras such as Samrangan Sutradhar and Brihad Samhita. This is just to show you a temple. Here at the back you can see that you have a Garbhagriha with a Shikara on top, and then you have Antaral or a vestibule, then you have a Mandapa, and then you have a Mukha Mandapa from where you enter, all right. All around it are carvings that further elaborate the architecture through alankar or decoration. Vastu Purush Mandala is the Sharir Yantra for temple construction. The square contains a circle, and spatially you have a temporal and dynamic rhythm in the circle. The square is a measure of a perfect man. It is as high as it is broad. Beneath the Devalya is the Vastu Purush Mandala. Then I have said that there is a Garbhagriha and the superstructure or the Shikara. Around the Garbhagriha is a pradakshina that allows the devotee to experience the images stationed on the walls. The mandapa serves various functions, especially public functions, especially from 12th century onwards. The temple has various symbolic meanings associated with the body cosmos. In the Hindu temple, the access of cosmic creation and the ritual path for the release, moksha, of the worshipper or the jajman meet. The temple becomes the reality of Purusha. In order to breathe life, prana, into a murti, an anthropomorphic image of the primordial man, Purusha, is drawn. This represents the universal spirit beneath the mandala. Purusha, which is beyond form, is the impulse towards manifestation. Alright? This is true whether it reflects the manifestation of the cosmos of the divine form or of the human potential within the temple. It is no wonder that this Purusha is conceived as underlying the ground plan of a new building. His body is subdivided, dismembered. Like you can see, this is the Purusha of the Vastu Purusha Mandal, where the navel is the Brahmasthal, the northeast direction where his head is the Ishana Kona, and you have the padas, the feet, the hands, etc., all of which are inhabited by various deities. The Hindu replicates a belief that believe in parts mirroring at the same time being the universal whole. That the whole, that though these are all deities that are subdivided, all right, in the Vastu Purush, but they are also part of the cosmic whole, okay. Like the Atmas are many and yet they are the same. You say that when you die you get assimilated into a Param Atma, all right. Similarly, you have different parts of a temple and yet it is part of the whole. There is also repetition in the entire temple structure, in which is something that keeps on emphasizing this wholeness, all right. It also reflects, the temple with its superstructure reflects the Mount Meru or Kailasha. This is also often mentioned in all temple inscriptions. It has very important political, economic and social functions along with obvious religious and social ones. So, you have or cultural ones. So, you have it is it's through temples that very often political dynasties are legitimized. It functions as an economic institution, as having lots of land. It functions as a landlord, as almost a city, So, the temple is has symbolic meaning. It is, but it also has very, very important political, institutional meanings also in this period. It gives us a picture of how a monument can hold not only aesthetic beauty but also spiritual symbolism. Okay. Again, temple building is a form of God. It is a living organism. We can see here, I have just shown you in the diagram as to how it is Purusha, but in elevation, that is how it rises also, you can see it is a Purusha. You have the Ushnisha or with hair, then you have the Shikha, then you have the Skanda, the neck, Griva, the shoulders, you have the hands, the Jangha, the feet, Charanam, etc. So, the entire human form is seen in the temple. This is also true of an icon, right. Of the various parts, the Garbhagriha represents caves in the mountains. If you have ever been to a temple, you will see that the Garbhagriha is a very dark interior space in which usually the only light is that of a diya or a lamp. Alright. Now of course in modern temples you might have a bulb or something lighting it, but usually there is only a diya lighting it. So it is a dark space, interior space, and it is like a cave in a mountain or a shelter or a site to contemplate experience of withdrawal from the world, and it is like where the sages could meditate. It is also a garbhagriha, a return to the womb like consciousness where Sat Chit Anand reside. It is the inner core of a sacred being, the Atma, spiritual self, which is one with Brahman, is there. It is the goal of all human endeavor. This is one of the first extant temples in India, which is temple number 17 at Sanchi, and it, as you can see, it is only the Garbhagriha with an open portico, and so here the Garbhagriha is a dark space in which the image of Buddha was enshrined. Alright. On top of this, just a simple cella, one chamber, a Shikara slowly developed. Now a Shikara is like a mountain peak or a crest which has significant features and superstructure of a Hindu temple. Okay. It suggests verticality, a realm beyond human, towards divinity. It recalls the cosmic mountain Meru, which was the central, the mythological center or the navel of the universe. Again, a reference to the axis. Okay. It also recalls Himalayas as the domain of heavenly beings, where all sages as well as apsaras and heavenly beings dwelt, Gandharvas. It also is a place of Himalayas where heroism and dwells, okay, where people go to look for Divyastras. It is the realm for meditating sages. In some temples, the curved contours and tiered arrangements give visual effect of a mountain peak, and this is again something that is mentioned in inscriptions. In others, fractal structures of mountain ranges. So, you have graded structures of a mountain range. The Shikara is a conglomerate of self-similar peaks at various points in the structure and displays a striking fractal quality. This is done through marking stories or bhumis, alright, or talas. Okay. This reflects a holy or divine geometry or mandala, and it expresses a deeply philosophical view of samatvam or sameness, which is Upanishadic in its content. Just to show you what these are like, you can see this rising as mountain peaks, okay, of a range with the amlak or again radiating the power of the universe, the universal power, alright, the universality. The kalash on top contains waters which are ritually important and are also representative of the cosmos, you know, and fertility, right. Then you have, as you can see, the mandapas, Mahamandapa, Mandapa, Ardhamandapa or the Mukhamandapa. Here you have the Jagati and the Pradakshina, right. This is a latina or curvilinear Shikara. There are two kinds of Shikara, North Indian Shikara, which is solid curvilinear Shikara bulging in the middle, which is ending in an amalak, which is, you know, I just shown you a round stone, and a South Indian Shikara, which is pyramid shaped and gradually receding stories divided by horizontal bands, ending in a dome barrel shaped ridge. This is an example of the South Indian Shikara. These are a regional variety of recent Shikaras of the North Indian type. Alright. Again you can see the bhumis here and the pyramidals.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry
you.
to interrupt you, ma'am, but we have a caller from Uttar Pradesh.
Sure.
So if we can take the call, please.
Yeah.
Yes, please share your question with us.
Madam, please describe the feature of Harappan architecture.
Features of Harappan architecture.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, and ma'am will answer your question.
Yeah. Well, Harappan architecture is, we have very little sacred architecture from Harappa. We have a lot of circular architecture. This is divided into two main areas. One is the citadel and one is the lower city. In the citadel you have public buildings. The public buildings basically could be storage spaces as well as areas for ritual exercises, such as the so-called stone altar courtyard, fire altar courtyard at Kalibangan, the great bath at Mohenjo-daro, or the bathing area or the shower at Dholavira. But the architecture really is dependent on the function. The other part of Harappan architecture that we can talk about is its building construction elements, which are based on uniformity of construction material, which are baked bricks, mostly baked bricks, especially in the Indus area. But you also have the use of sun-dried bricks in some areas. They are usually in the 1:2:3 proportion, but sometimes they have also been found in.
Ma'am, we are getting another question from Bihar. Can we take that?
Sure.
Yes, please tell us your question.
Yes, ma'am. So, what is the benefits of art and architecture?
Benefits, can you repeat again? Benefits of art and
Architecture.
architecture. Benefits of art and architecture.
Benefits of whom? If you could clarify the question, is it the benefit for students or it is the benefit for devotee, or who are the benefits for? Are you talking about?
Yes,
you just
are you
clarify?
there? In my mind got disconnected. So maybe we can talk about benefits for students.
Okay. The study of art and architecture for students, especially who are doing their exams, is very important because they are very important for constructing cultural history of India. Through the study of art and architecture, we can understand how certain dynasties were able to have their own particular identities. But more importantly, it is also important for the study of religion. Through the study of art and architecture, we can understand how religion changes. Alright, what are the new elements that are coming into religion? Is it expanding? What are the new ways in which people are experiencing certain images?
Right.
Alright.
Ma'am, another caller from Odisha. Yes. Please share your question.
Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Madam.
please. हाँ जी बोलिए.
Hello. Madam.
Yes.
Hello.
हाँ बोलिए.
हाँ आवाज आ रही है
My
आपकी.
question, madam.
Please reduce the volume of your
Why there
television.
is a erotic picture? What is the special importance?
Can you please repeat? Please reduce the volume of your television because we cannot
In
hear you.
architecture of the temple,
Yes. Yes. What about architecture of the
What
temple?
is the special importance of erotic picture?
Oh, the importance of erotic sculpture.
Okay, thank you.
The importance of erotic sculptures on temple architecture. Now, erotic sculptures, as you know, have been found from Nasik onwards, cave number 3 of Nasik onwards, which is datable to about 2nd century AD. And then 3rd century AD onwards, and then they have been elaborated partly in Gupta sculptures and then very much so in the sun temples and in Khajuraho, whether it is in the Lingaraj temple or in Modhera temples. But these erotic sculptures have been variously interpreted. According to Thomas Donaldson, who says that these have functions of kind of what they function as ridding the temple of the evil eye, apotropiac functions. That is that if you put these sculptures, then there won't be any evil eye on it, okay, and there will be auspiciousness. Fertility will accrue to the temple because these are couples in eternal union. All right, that is one explanation. Another explanation that has been given by Professor Devangana Desai is that if you must study where these erotic sculptures are put. These are put at junctures, where one wall meets another, where one projection meets another projection at doorways. Now, these are places which again are where unities and unions are important, which again are like joining, okay. So, it's not just that they put any which where, they have this kind of an importance to where are they placed. The third, of course, a very traditional explanation is that they are somehow or the other showing tantric rites. But if one were to analyze these, underneath these are some kind of yantras and mandalas which have esoteric symbolism, such as the Kamala yantra, so they have symbolism also, which underlies these kind of erotic sculptures. So these are not random sculptures for the enjoyment of people, but they have some kind of ritual as well as architectural importance.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am, and I hope the question was answered. And so as we draw to the end of the lecture, I would like to thank ma'am for being here and for giving us such wonderful insight into Indian art and architecture. And as I mentioned, it's an ongoing series, so we will have subsequent lectures as well, and we will have ma'am here on different occasions. So today we looked at Indian architecture more in depth, and we talked about stupas, its symbolism. We looked at temples, their symbolism. We talked about Shikara, we talked about Garbhagriha, and I would also like to thank the listeners and also those who called in for your valuable questions. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to have you here again. Thank you. Have a nice day.